The story begins with a 16-year-old boy named Brian, who has always aspired to become a basketball player. Despite his best efforts, he fails to make the school team, the Eagles, and is instead assigned to carry water bottles for the players.
Nice catch.
One day, Brian watches in awe as his idol, Kevin, dominates a basketball game, scoring effortlessly and leading his team to victory.
Oh, boom! That's another dunk.
Inspired by Kevin's incredible performance, Brian vows to reach that level one day.
Boom! I could do that. I'm ready.
Filled with determination, he starts practicing, but every time he attempts a shot, he ends up failing miserably.
Oh.
Meanwhile, after securing a victory, Kevin is swarmed by reporters and fans as he leaves the court. His agent, Alan, helps him escape the crowd. The next day at school, Brian is chatting with his best friend, Mitch, when he notices a new girl, Isabel, walking past. His heart pounds and he can't help but grin.
Isabel Sanchez.
Isabel smiles back at him. Later at lunch, Brian finds himself unable to look away from her. Mitch warns him not to get his hopes up, reminding him that most of the school sees him as a loser. But Brian remains optimistic.
Look, she's new. She doesn't know anything about me. I have a clean slate.
Determined, he decides to talk to her as soon as possible. Just then, a prankster named Connor plays a video on the cafeteria's TV showing Brian attempting a trampoline-assisted dunk, only to end up tangled in the net. The entire cafeteria erupts in laughter, leaving Brian humiliated. Feeling embarrassed, he quietly leaves, but Isabel feels bad for him. That evening, while Brian is at home, his father surprises him with 2 tickets to a basketball game.
Really?
Soon, he and his father arrive at the game, and Brian watches in amazement as Kevin puts on a spectacular performance. During the halftime break, the host announces that one lucky spectator will have the chance to take a shot for a $20,000 prize. To Brian's shock, his father's name is called. However, being the supportive dad he is, he gives Brian the opportunity instead, encouraging him to take the shot.
You want it!
As Brian steps onto the court, he notices Connor in the audience, phone in hand, ready to capture his failure. Nervously, Brian throws the ball, but instead of making the shot, he accidentally hits the team's mascot. Embarrassed, Brian turns to leave when he unexpectedly runs into Kevin. Kevin offers words of encouragement, signs a basketball for him, and tells Brian that hard work can be just as valuable as talent. As Kevin hands him the ball, Brian feels a strange energy transfer from it to him. The next morning, Brian hears on the radio that Kevin played terribly after halftime, causing his team to lose. This news leaves Brian feeling uneasy. Despite feeling down, Brian gets ready and heads to school. That evening, he and Mitch go to a local fair, where they unexpectedly run into Connor and Isabel. Connor is attempting to win a large teddy bear for Isabel by tossing a ball into the corner net, but no matter how many times he tries, he keeps missing. Seeing this, Brian and Mitch burst into laughter. Frustrated, Connor snatches Brian's basketball and challenges him to take a shot.
Think you do better, hang time? Why don't you give it a try?
Brian expects to embarrass himself, but when he throws the ball, it lands perfectly in the target. The crowd is stunned, assuming it was just luck. However, as Brian continues sinking shot after shot, everyone around is amazed. Furious, Connor storms off while Brian wins the teddy bear and hands it to Isabel. They shake hands and stroll through the fair together. Meanwhile, Kevin was struggling during practice, missing shots he would normally make with ease. Both he and Alan were concerned, especially after Kevin's disappointing performance in his last game. Alan tried to reassure him, reminding Kevin that setbacks happen to everyone. Meanwhile, Brian had been training at home and was amazed at how dramatically his skills had improved overnight.
I can dunk. I can dunk. Oh, I can dunk! Guys, I can dunk!
The next day, Brian arrived at school wearing a basketball jersey and headed straight to the court. The coach, taken aback by his appearance, reminded him that he was just the team's water boy. Brian insisted that he wanted to try out for the team. At first, the coach refused, but after Brian's relentless pleading, he reluctantly agreed to give him a chance. Brian faced off against Connor, the team captain. To everyone's shock, Brian's shots were flawless, leaving the entire team in awe of his sudden transformation. No one could understand how he had improved so quickly. Even the coach decided to challenge him, but Brian outplayed him as well. Impressed by his extraordinary skills, the coach finally allowed Brian to join the team. Over the next few days, Brian competed in several games against other schools, leading his team to victory. His popularity skyrocketed, and suddenly everyone at school wanted to be friends with him. At the same time, he grew closer to Isabel, and before long, the two developed a romantic connection. Meanwhile, Kevin's struggles continued, and harsh criticism from the media began damaging his reputation. Alan tried everything to help, even reaching out to Kevin's mother for encouragement, but nothing seemed to get him back on track. One day, Kevin was shooting a commercial for a basketball shoe brand, but he struggled to dribble properly. After hours of failed takes, the frustrated director finally decided to cut him from the advertisement. Later that evening, Alan, feeling defeated, was flipping through TV channels when he stumbled upon a news segment about Kevin's declining career. Annoyed, he switched channels only to see another report, this time about Brian. People were starting to call Brian the next Kevin Durant. That's when Alan recalled that just a month ago, this kid couldn't even land a single shot. It was a bizarre transformation. Brian had once thrown a ball so wildly that it flew nearly 4 kilometers away. Intrigued, Alan reviewed footage of Brian's games and noticed that his playing style was identical to Kevin's. This made Alan question whether Kevin and Brian's abilities had somehow been switched. He shared his theory with Kevin, pointing out how Brian, once an average player, was now dominating junior tournaments. However, Kevin laughed it off, thinking Alan was being ridiculous. The next day, Alan took Kevin to Brian's school and introduced the two. He encouraged them to spend the day together, hoping it might somehow restore Kevin's lost skills. Alan suggested they hang out, since they were both exceptional basketball players. Brian and Kevin spent the day talking and even had a meal together. But despite their time together, nothing changed, leaving Alan even more frustrated. Meanwhile, Brian's confidence started turning into arrogance. During games, he focused only on scoring, refusing to pass the ball to his teammates. While his team continued to win, his friends grew disappointed.
Like an idiot, man!
Whoa.
What's he doing? He couldn't make our freshman team before. What's he doing
You still
now?
get an assist, right?
Meanwhile, Kevin struggled through his own game, failing to land a single shot. Fans and the media ridiculed him, shocked by his unusually poor performance. That evening, Brian hosted a party to celebrate his newfound success, inviting a large crowd. However, Isabel wasn't happy. She noticed that Brian was no longer the humble and kind person he used to be. She tried to pull Brian aside for a private conversation, but he was too caught up with his new cool friends and ignored her. Frustrated, Isabel left the party. Shortly after, Alan arrived and took Brian aside for a serious talk. He explained that Brian and Kevin had somehow swapped abilities, but Brian refused to believe him. Alan pressed further, asking, "How did you go from being just an average player to a superstar overnight?"
But that talent you now have is not yours. No, you're wrong. It's not magic. I worked for this.
He urged Brian to return Kevin's talent, but Brian stubbornly refused. "I didn't take anything on purpose, and I'm not giving it back," he said. Before leaving, Alan warned Brian that using someone else's talent unfairly wasn't right. He was deceiving everyone. The next day at school, the coach gathered the Eagles team and excitedly announced that they were only one game away from becoming champions. The team erupted in cheers. Later, while riding his bike, Brian noticed a poster of Kevin and started feeling guilty. He realized how much Kevin had been struggling and how badly his reputation had suffered. Knowing it was time to set things right, Brian called Alan and told him he had made his decision. Brian and Alan met Kevin at the basketball court where he was practicing. They urged him,
I want to give your talent.
but Kevin was skeptical and reluctant. However, when Brian effortlessly pulled off Kevin's signature move, something only Kevin had ever mastered, Kevin was taken aback. Determined to reverse whatever had happened, Kevin attempted multiple times to regain his abilities. He used the same ball, repeated the same phrases, but nothing worked, leaving all three of them frustrated. Later, Brian went to Isabel's house to apologize. Though she was still upset, she eventually forgave him and invited him in. Brian then explained the whole story about how he and Kevin had somehow swapped powers, but Isabel was skeptical.
See, I told you you wouldn't believe me.
Well, I'm not stupid, Brian.
To convince her, Brian played the video from the day everything changed. As soon as she saw the exact moment when the ball hit the mascot, something clicked in Brian's mind. Without another word, he rushed out. Brian sprinted to the basketball court where Kevin was playing. He saw that Kevin's team hadn't scored a single point. Running onto the court, he told Kevin that he had finally figured out how to return his skills. He explained that the key was to recreate what had happened that day. The ball had to hit the mascot first. Without hesitation, Brian aimed and struck the mascot, knocking it over. Then, both he and Kevin grabbed the ball at the same time. Kevin said,
"I wish I had your talent."
To which Brian responded,
Hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard.
Suddenly, a surge of energy passed from Brian to Kevin, confirming that their plan had worked. As the game continued, Kevin's performance skyrocketed. He made one shot after another, stunning the crowd. His team secured the victory, and Brian couldn't have been happier. The next day, it was time for Brian's final match, but he knew things wouldn't be the same. As soon as the game started, he struggled, making mistakes just like before, which worried his coach. Then, Kevin and Alan arrived, adding to Brian's nervousness. But he reminded himself of Kevin's words, "Hard work can beat talent." Determined, Brian gathered his teammates and told them that since he wasn't at his best, they needed to rely on teamwork and support each other's strengths. With renewed focus and cooperation, they fought their way back into the game. Brian's team played well, but in the final 10 seconds, they were still 2 points short. The ball landed in Brian's hands, and he took a risky 3-point shot. The crowd held its breath as the ball soared through the air, then swished perfectly into the hoop. With that clutch shot, Brian's team secured the win. His teammates lifted him onto their shoulders in celebration, while Kevin, watching from the sidelines, gave him a nod of approval before quietly leaving the court.